Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending our Back to School webinar with Leostream and Liquidware. Today's subject is about preparing for hybrid and remote learning, hybrid remote learning, I should say. And so today we're going to give you an overview of some of the ways that Leostream and Liquidware can help prepare your institution for remote learning. Today I have with me, so I'm Jason Smith, VP of Marketing, Product Marketing for Liquidware. But today I also am honored to have Karen Gondoly with me from Leostream. And
Hello.
also, go ahead, Karen.
I was just gonna say hello.
Hi, and we're great to have you here with an alliance partnership that dates back several years, several joint customers, and also Thomas Lahaussois, our Director of Alliances with Liquidware. Thomas, say
Thank
hello.
you, Jason. Hi, everyone. Great to meet you.
So, of course, as many webinars these days, the subject happens to be all around the COVID-19 crisis, unfortunately. But many schools are struggling with the challenge of going back to school and coping with ways that each individual local region will do that. Today we'll talk about an overview. Actually, we'll give you a background of the way that a survey has turned out from Liquidware and Leostream to share with you what the community thinks about going back to school and some of the concerns. We'll give you an introduction and some of the main concepts of how some of these schools are starting to cope going back to school. And then we'll give you an overview from both Liquidware and Leostream, how they can help. Liquidware with their dynamic desktops and adaptive workspace management, managing remote students on any type of desktop, and Leostream by being able to delegate remote access, giving you access to anywhere, to anything, any app, so work can get done. This survey that I alluded to, there was over 260 respondents that chimed in within the last few weeks to this very unique survey. And the respondents, it covered the gamut from all levels of education, from pre-K, K-12 through college and university. It mostly focused on the US region. The respondents that chimed in, the majority of them were parents and family members, so you'll see a lot of the concerns there that they expressed. And then a surprising amount of educators and staff responded, as well as community members, those that may not be either or have children in the school system. So some of the major concerns you'll see over on the right-hand side of the slide, and respondents could choose more than one area of concern. Many of them, as you see, cited emotional reasons and child and family health reasons for back to school concerns. Safety reasons were in there, as well as the debatable face mask, or non-debatable, depending on who you're speaking to. The uncertainty among it all, but one of the things that really stood out was the technology challenges. Nearly 1 in every 5 respondents chimed in that it was a major concern for technology challenges, how their child or how classroom education would be delivered in the face of organizations needing to adapt to this back to school. And just to level set us, we're calling this back to school 2.0 because many schools coped with a 1.0 situation in the midst of the calendar year last year. As we walk through this, you'll see that the concerns continue to be, whether there's a plan or not. So surprisingly, within the last 2 weeks, 75% did not know of the plan of going back to school, the specifics. And even in the region where I live, just a personal data point, I have 2 children in the K through 12 area of school, and the school district here in North Georgia, in the county that I live in, within the last 48 hours, has decided to indeed continue going back to school with physical in-person classes, but they're going to delay the opening by a week. So this is changing very rapidly. School was to start a week and a half from now, and it's changed a bit even in the region where I am. So not knowing the plan was a 75% respondent rate. Do you agree with the plan? Only 21% agreed with the plan if they knew the plan, right? And this really echoes the fact that you're not going to, the school districts, many of you on the phone associated with school districts, no matter what you do, you're not going to satisfy the majority of the people out there. 79%, in other words, disagree with the plan, whatever your plan is. And then 74% did say some form of remote needed to be in place. Another area that was very interesting was whether or not a device had been issued. And I said, this is very interesting. It was to me when I saw this, because 79% of people said that their student had been issued a device. And if you were a school administrator, that they had issued devices. That means that they had issued whether it was a laptop, a Chromebook, an iPad, and then you see that rate on the right in the next graph. Only 22% had been issued a full laptop, while Chromebooks and iPads were almost evenly split in the 30-something% range. And then other devices consisted of maybe Android devices. We're not sure in that area because it was other. So what were some of the drawbacks and some of the woes of remote learning 1.0? In other words, when the school year got interrupted last year, a lack of interaction by students once you had to go virtual was cited as an overwhelming concern. Social and emotional, not being able to have that connect point of in-person classes was also more than half the participants. You can see a lot of the responses here for yourself, but again, technology challenges was 30%. Was a woe and concern because many students were sent home with no plan, and there was a delay. I know in our regions, in some counties, there was a delay in anything happening for a week to a week and a half to 2 weeks before even some of the most basic remote learning tools were used. So 30% cited technology challenges was indeed a major concern and a drawback during the midst of the last school year when schools were interrupted. So what does this data really tell us? Many districts and institutions are still finalizing plans. You know, I want to point out that if you're looking at college and secondary education, many of those organizations that may have already had a huge online focus had an advantage going into this crisis because they already had their system set up and were ready to go. In other words, they could onboard many people at any given time and also be able to scale up. But many institutions are still finalizing even their current plans for 2.0, back to school 2.0. Students will be either part-time, full-time, a combination thereof. Access to computer labs will obviously be limited with social distancing still in place in many regions of the country. It is readily apparent that school systems need to be prepared for both synchronous and asynchronous learning at a moment's notice. In other words, be ready to adapt with remote learning 2.0. If an outbreak of COVID were to occur in a region, plans could change in a moment's notice. How could you give students access to virtual workspaces, for example, or increased access to the remote learning? Monitoring of student activity will need to increase so you can make sure that students are indeed productive, but not only productive, that the user experience of the platforms that you're using is indeed a quality user experience. This term cohorting has to do with the fact that classrooms may be split up in certain local regions under smaller group sets, 4 to 5, or at least half the classroom, cohorting with a smaller group. So this will create unique challenges to be able to manage, and many of those will be done with technology, keeping those cohorted groups in touch. And technology challenges will indeed continue to be at the forefront. Emerging technologies like cloud desktops could help give a full platform to any type of application and access that you may need. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about the role of learning management systems within the schools. Learning management systems up until this previous year had been seen as a saturated market and really plateaued in its adoption. A learning management system, if your district has not implemented one, and surprising to me, many districts had not implemented this ahead of COVID. What this does is gives your students and even parents access to a learning management system to be able to check in online at a moment's notice, see if their classroom has changed, for the students to receive their assignments, even to receive their grades, and perhaps links to a full platform such as a remote workspace to get into a Windows machine or other school resources and file shares. So some of the leading learning management systems are mentioned here. For example, in our region, its learning is used through the K through 12, and with my university student, D2L is a popular platform there. Many school systems implemented Google Classroom because they had easy access to it on short notice. Blackboard Open has been another leading one, as well as the rest of them here. So some school districts were a little better prepared by having learning management systems in place. And these can be developed out for your local region as broadly as possible or as needed. You can add resources, as I said, to areas where you can get remote applications, open up a remote desktop, have hooks into things like that through the technologies we're going to be speaking about today. But learning management systems can be key, but they also have their drawbacks. If you do not build them out, if you do not give students and teachers access to the resources they need, for example, a full workspace, such as a Windows type workspace with all the applications they need, they may fall short of delivering a full virtual learning experience. So now we're going to move today's presentation into the sponsoring organizations, Leostream as well as Liquidware. After Leostream presents, Liquidware will move. Actually, Liquidware is presenting first, I believe, and then we'll move into the Leostream portion. And then again, a reminder, Liquidware really simplifies the user desktop and application management at scale of any platform, giving you access to a full workspace, for example, for educational institutions to use, or any other type of organization, whether it be a physical, virtual, or cloud-based desktop. While Leostream provides delegated remote access to hosted desktops, giving you seamless access to not only desktops, but applications as well. I'd like to pass the presentation rights over to Thomas today, as in Liquidware will be presenting first.
Thank you, Jason, and hi, everyone. Right, so I'm going to kickstart the first half of the overview through Liquidware. We have two subsections. One of them is how we can help deliver desktop and application. Then we'll go into how to monitor students. Before I start diving into the product, I wanted to mention a couple things on our focus as an organization. Based on our experience, we know that some of you guys have invested in platforms such as VMware, Citrix, and we're seeing an uptick into cloud desktop architecture. Now, we are by no means competing with those solutions, and actually Karen will discuss that, and we'll probably mention how we can work with those platforms. And we made a living as an organization, both Leostream and Liquidware, in working in partnership with the organization. We're also aware that some of those platforms are either represent a significant investment, both in cost, but also in infrastructure, such as hardware and storage when it comes to the traditional VDI platform that's prohibitive for some K-12 or university to implement. So one slide I wanted to present, and the real reason behind that webinar is, although we tend not to admit it, for the purpose of back to school and specifically university, both Leostream and Liquidware you can consider us as point solution. We share the same characteristic where we are platform agnostic, So we'll work with all the platforms you can think of: physical, virtual, cloud, on-premises. But we'll provide unique benefits in specific area that we believe are important for you now. For example, while you'll see how Karen will describe in great detail how they can give you access to, for example, lab equipment or workspace from anywhere, regardless of what platform it's running on, giving you extreme flexibility. Liquidware will focus on how you can manage students, and will complement the remote access that Leostream provides by giving you, I would say, additional tools to manage the remote access. So in clear, we play at the application, the user level, as well as everything that's going on inside the computer. So we're not involved in the access of the computer itself. That's 100% Leostream. We come in play after or before, depending on how you want to look at it. So complete complementary, also very flexible in what platform you have currently or the one you're considering. Put it shortly, Liquidware have 3 solutions today. And I'll talk about all 3 of them and more specifically how they can help. We have a user environment management solution called Profile Unity that will manage pretty much everything that makes your desktop. So not so much the desktop itself, but everything that goes in it and how you see it, how you consume the data, how you consume the application. We have an application layering solution called FlexApp, and that's going to be a big center of the presentation because it helps deliver apps on demand. The best way I can describe it is, if you're familiar on how you would add an app on your smartphone, think that way for a computer. That's application layering. And finally, we have a monitoring and diagnostic solution, primarily used by our customers to do user experience and troubleshooting and trending. We're going to see in that presentation how you can use it to, I would say, monitor the activity or monitor your new setup for when you start back in school in September. So let's start with Profile Unity. User environment management, what does it mean? We're able to capture and manage everything that's specific about a user when it logs into a Windows desktop, regardless of the platform, so physical, virtual, cloud, regardless of the OS, as long as it's Windows. So we don't care what version, different version of OS. We don't care. We're going to do a single delivery. And very important, context-aware policies or rules. And that's going to be something I touch upon because, especially in our environment today, where as students, but also staff or teacher, you may have different rules, or you may want your environment to behave differently, whether it's the device they have or just the way they work, depending on whether they're on campus this week or off campus. It's also something we'll be able to adjust based on who logs on what. I'm a student, I'm logging to a lab equipment. You may want to have some restriction in place. I'm a teacher, and so on and so forth. So all in all, single unified profile management that's really focused solely around the user. We don't care about the machine. We don't care about the OS. We don't care about the platform. It's considered that almost like follow me profile. So quick geeky side. I promise I won't go too deep, but what is a profile and how we manage it? It's really, this is very technical, but the way you want to think about it is, again, everything that is specific to your desktop. Could be user preferences or things that user change and want to see. It could also be settings that, as an admin or your IT department or help desk, want to enforce. Now we're getting into more things like security, securing a desktop, controlling the change that may be done to a Windows device environment, and so on. The main things for us is that we operate, think about it almost as backup and restore. When a user logs in, restore its profile. When he logs off, we back up his profile, so it always follows you as a user. Now you can choose, a couple of things that are specific to Profile Unity is that we're not going to force you to do everything. Like most, I would say, core platform profile management tool, it's either you manage it or you don't. In the case of Profile Unity, you can pick and choose, so we can do as little or as much as you want. For example, you may not want to capture and store whatever shortcut that the students put on his web browser. Don't care. They're not something you want to even bother managing. As a matter of fact, in most students, there's a lot portion of the profile that you don't want to manage. It's not part of your responsibility. You don't want to store that. You don't want to pay for storage. So you could have settings or profile that are very lightweight for students that could be attached, for example, to just group of students, whether you're in social study or computer science, or could be tied to what class they're going into, what lab they're accessing. And more importantly, you can choose to have some settings that are restore only, never saved. And that's where you can start to get into restriction, control, securing, and making your life easier. Securing desktop or lab equipment, so you don't have to reset or deal with an additional help desk, resetting of environment. So help secure, but also manage expectation. A quick look as an example of what does it mean what do we manage? And really, I just wanted to point out in this illustration, what does that mean? So you can see here a couple typical example, whether it's what shortcuts you're going to see, what drive or application you're going to access when you log into that machine. We'll see it a bit later in the presentation how FlexUp can be added into the mix. But this could be, for example, environments where that change completely, whether you are a student logging or a teacher logging while you're on campus. You could see the map drive, the access you want to because you're on campus, or different when you're working from home. Same thing, it could be, we talked a little earlier, Jason mentioned the concept of cohorting students. You could have, based on our context filters, rules that will basically allow you to have printers that are directly assigned based on, again, those contexts. You're on campus, you're in that location, this is the printer you'll see mapped to you automatically. So again, the whole idea behind that is set up rules that are flexible to make. So you don't apply a rule if you don't need to. For example, here there is a automatic signature in my emails. Well, maybe you don't want that. You don't care about it. So you can pick and choose what you want. And this way allow for simplified management of your environment. One quick example, for example, as we mentioned, is that the whole concept of Profile Unity is the ability to store a single profile for, let's say, a teacher, and that will apply depending on where you are. So I could have a common set of rules that will apply no matter where I am, but I have a second one that will apply whether I'm on campus or remote. Those will be stored and attached to the user and will apply using our context-aware filter automatically. It's not rules you have to create and move them left and right, etc. Once it's set up, it will be dynamic, back and forth. No change need to be made. No manual steps need to be taken. And I forgot that transition. Sorry about that. Here we go. So quick recap, the couple of things for me that are mostly important. I think the secure desktop setup will be important specifically for your computer and lab equipment that remains on campus. The ability to make them pristine after each session, simplified the management of those lab equipment, of those computers that resides on site, or the Windows device you've allowed the customer, allowing them not to be administrator, or in some case, depending on the profile of the students or the teacher, we have a rule, for example, that allow for privilege elevation, so that somebody that consider a teacher will be giving access to the command prompt if you want, or adding a new drive, so they'll become administrator but not students. So the enforcement of security and I would say the ability to simplify by hardening those devices should make your life easier. Follow me profile, as was mentioned, as students move from one place to another, same as staff, same as student, as teacher. and similar to the follow me printing, which is a great example. Now let's dive into application layering. As I mentioned before, FlexApp allows you to deliver application on the fly. The concept is fairly simple. What we do is we, in a very simple process, we can capture an application and redirect whatever the application is installing on a VHD. Now, a VHD is basically a file extension that has the unique property to behave as a disk. So after we capture that application, store that as a VHD, you can assign it to students, to device, etc. What happens when you log in or when you boot that machine, depending on how you want to deliver it, is that we're going to mount that VHD file to the machine. And we're basically, the only thing we're moving are basically what we call filter drivers, small shortcuts that will make that application look and behave exactly as if it was native. So we're not talking about application virtualization here. It's purely application layering. The best example I can give is this will behave exactly like if you install an application on a D drive instead of C drive. The only difference is that it won't show on D, it will show under your C program file if that's where the application gets installed. So it makes it very easy because it's basically a disk mount. It takes a tenth of a second to load, to attach, detach, attach, detach. Now your application are completely separate from the device itself. And we're going to see how this becomes interesting specifically for lab environments. Quick words on how we work together. So FlexApp is managing the application itself. So if you look at the blue box, that's your device. You log in, you're a teacher, you're going to see those apps. Actually, you won't see them because they'll be already there, but they're going to show. So you're going to have Chrome, Excel, Autobats that, again, will behave exactly like if they're native. On the other end, if we combine Profile Unity with it, Profile Unity is going to handle the configuration, the settings on the profile. For example, I could have a device with all those apps mounted. As I'm logging in as a teacher, I see all of them. Now I could log in as a student, part of that students group. And I decide in my profile, my configuration, that students should not see Excel. Right, that's a rule from Profile Unity that's going to overlap with FlexApp. So combining the two, you have extreme flexibility in how you want to present those machines to the end user. Quick example, and Karen will dive a lot more into how you can handle lab environments and in a very interesting way. But the one thing I wanted to point out is how we fit into that. So again, Leostream is going to handle the access to the lab and the entire management of the labs. Where FlexApp comes in here is app management. So if you look at this diagram, you can imagine having a lab that I called very smartly Lab 1. You could have a number of core applications already loaded, maybe your Office suite, your web browser, etc. Now you have some specific application and software that you want for specific lab sessions. And as you can see, I mentioned a couple of examples: computer science, social study. Now the idea here is that you can either deliver them on demand. So when it's not to start computer science 101, only the application that are part of that group that you've basically drag and drop into the CS 101 group will just be shown and mounted on the lab equipment. 2 minutes later, you finish, it's 10:01, move on to advanced statistics. They log in, they won't see the computer science application. They're gone, they're unmounted. They'll see the has 200 groups of application and so on. So the same lab machine can be used at will for different classroom environments. You can see where if you needed to expand your lab capacity for remote access, how this can be delivered on the fly. And this can be triggered by different things. It can be triggered by, oh, okay, great, I'm starting that classroom and those students are part of that class. So it can be tied to the user and what group they belong to. or this can be scheduled regardless of login. So you could basically set up your schedule and says, well, Thursday at 10:01, at 10 o'clock, this is CS 101, and those are the one mounted, and so on and so forth.
Thomas, there's a related question that's come in.
Oh, sorry.
It's somewhat related to this. So it's about context-aware settings. Could profiles be set up and data be context-aware dependent so that if they're in person on campus, or even if they have to be sent home, certain people out of that group, I guess, to be quarantined, could they have a similar experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the strength of context-aware settings. There is, I think I lost count, but probably a couple hundred different ways you can set up those contexts. So that we would adjust the access, the look and feel, and even the experience depending on not only who you are, but where you are. So can set them says, oh, you're connecting remotely, so we're going to use, I don't know, a different path for folder or application to make sure that you have exactly the same experience on whether you're on site, on campus, or remotely.
Great. And just to keep up with the questions, there was a question about the raw survey data that I presented earlier, if it could be provided. Reach out to us directly if you'd like access to that. We had to filter some of it to clean it up and everything, and we'll be glad to provide what we can. So you can reach out to our email at sales@liquidware.
Yeah, that was a great point. I was just seeing that one. Obviously, I think for privacy and rules, we can't just upload the raw data. But after we clean that, we will be following this presentation with a follow-up email from both Liquidware and Leostream. If you want to reply and whoever asks for this to see the raw server data, just do reply and ask for it, and we'll be happy to provide that once we again clean it up. Right, so let's recap on FlexApp. On-demand application delivery, again, on the fly, rebuilt an entire labs from scratch, 30 seconds apart with complete different set of application. You become completely independent. You don't need to go on site. You don't need to apply it. I have applications that are specific to different group of students. One thing I will mention, here we go, upgrade application. One of the great benefits is also the ability to almost upgrade an application or add a new application on the fly. We've had a story a couple of years ago of an IT department, I think it was a university or school, I can't remember, was using FlexApp, and he came back to us with a story that made us smile. He was at his desk and got a call from the teacher that was currently doing a lab session. It says, oh, we don't have Firefox. I need Firefox. So he calls support and says, how can we help? And the admin already had packaged Firefox. So the process to add Firefox to the class in session was for him as simple as says, right, give me 2 seconds, basically drag and drop from his management console Firefox to that group, and says, right, ask your students to log off and log back in. They logged off, logged back in, Firefox was on the desktop. Native in the desktop, as if it was always here. So that's that simple, so that it's that simple to apply a new application. And one thing is sure is that the future is really uncertain. So what application you need today, who's to tell what you're going to need in October? So to keep that flexibility in line will be essential. Same idea about upgrades. You can package a new upgrade application and have it available the next time a user logs in. Right, I'm going to speed out a little bit because I want to give Karen plenty of time to go over our solutions. I'll just finish with a couple of use cases around monitoring and reportings. Quick intro. Stratosphere allows us to track anything that's going on to the desktop, regardless of platforms. Physical, virtual, cloud, Windows, Mac, Linux, we don't care. We see all of it. It was simple, but wanted to mention it. And one of the use case, and a couple of reports actually we built in that purpose, is the ability to monitor students. Now, I want to be careful when I mention monitoring students. Our goal and respect for privacy means that our goal is never to tell you what the students is doing, what website is going into, etc. That's really not our job here. Where we see value is the ability to just track activity. Keep a track, if that simple ability to track how many sessions are open, how long have an alerts, or simple checklist that basically alerts you when students haven't checked in a week. We're hearing from different places in the world, even different states in the US, where some schools and university will be responsible to keep a pulse on student activity, to maybe react and have a protocol started when his students haven't checked in 7 weeks. Maybe he's sick, maybe there's something. So you have simple reports in there, a dashboard that will tell you just that. You don't need to know anything, but just, hey, let me know if students haven't reported in 7 weeks so you can take actions. That could be as simple as that. It could be as complex as tracking overall, remote session activity, just to keep an eye on your bandwidth, network capacities, web servers, and so on and so forth. So make sure you're handling the capacity. Maybe learning, because this is new territory for all of us, learning about how does it fluctuate, how does your equipment is being used, at what time of the day, what day in the week, and so on and so forth. Support is another example. Again, what we've learned so far is that, again, depending on the regions and the states, some laws or some rules in place will impose responsibility on the schools and the university to become almost like help desk for the students if they cannot connect. Now, we fully realize that most university, most support are not staffed for that, to provide full help desk for remote users. It's not part of what you've done before. So there's a couple tools in Stratosphere that will bring intelligence to you. For example, and one thing I wanted to mention is the simplification of troubleshooting and remote. It could be as simple as alerting you when somebody's having a problem, but even going further and providing interpretation, intelligence, so you don't have to spend an hour on the phone to try to understand that, yeah, you've just turned the VPN off, or you're too far from your Wi-Fi router. We'll go as far as basically understanding how strong your signal is, and we can bring those interpretation that tells you, oh, that's the problem, that's the solution. Go straight to the solution, provide that to the students. Don't waste time and resource trying to troubleshoot their environment. And oops, maybe if I click it will be better. Last but not least, all about backend monitoring. So we talked about labs, we talked about equipment. You have an environment in place. Now, how that environment, how that equipment is going to be used, is going to be different hours, let's control, remote access. We have the ability to track how it's being used on the back end, alert you when things are getting out of hand. This lab equipment is at 95% capacity, you need to add more. This other lab equipment is not being used. So great flexibility in understanding workloads, but also resources. So you can dynamically look at trending and adjust resources as needed. And I'll skip through that to pass the relay to Karen, who will introduce you to their solution Leostream. Karen, it's all you.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Thomas. So you've seen that with Liquidware, you can manage desktop applications and profile and have some really powerful monitoring tools. But as Thomas mentioned, students still need to log into the desktop in the first place. Now that's straightforward enough when they sit down at a desk, but what happens when your student body disperses, potentially around the globe? If you think about it, your applications, profiles, and monitoring metrics are applied to the desktops, which is essentially computing resources. If you have an engineering student who needs access to a CAD application, that application needs to run on a machine with the necessary CPU and potentially GPU. So if you want to build a hybrid learning environment with remote and on-prem users, you need a way to connect remote and on-prem students to the correct computing resource, which could be in a specific lab or classroom, that could be hosted on a virtual machine and may even be up in the public cloud. So when you get to a point where students are no longer walking up to the machine they need to log into, how do you guarantee that they log into the right computing resource based on the class they're in and what they need to do? How do you distribute a remote student body across your available computing resources and ensure it's done in a way that facilitates your on-premises users as well? Well, that's where Leostream comes in. It starts with authentication. Students log into desktops with a password, right? But before you get to that point, they need a gatekeeper that allows only permitted remote users to log into that desktop. Leostream allows you to leverage your existing authentication servers for this task. We see Active Directory used in many environments, but any authentication server based on Open LDAP works just fine for Leostream as well. And Leostream integrates with a number of multi-factor authentication systems, such as Duo and Okta, just to name a couple. A question I get very often when talking with schools is if they can enforce MFA for students logging in remotely while not requiring MFA for anyone who is on campus. Well, the answer is yes, and I'll show you in the demo how you can accomplish that. For students who pass through your authentication system, then it's a matter of giving them easy access to the right computing resources. The key in Leostream here is that we provide very flexible pooling mechanisms. So you can group desktops based on how you need to dole access out. Maybe you want to group machines based on the physical classroom or lab where the machines are actually located. Maybe you want to group based on CPU for those CAD applications. Leostream pooling allows you to group machines based on what makes sense for your unique situation, and then control access to those machines based on who the user is and where they log in from. Now, the concept of assigning students to pools based on who they are is pretty standard across connection brokers. Typically, the idea here is to create groups in Active Directory and entitle access to pools based on group membership. But the concept of locations is unique to Leostream as a connection broker. Leostream looks at where the user is logging in from, as well as who they are, so you can change what the user has access to, how they connect, and how that session is managed based on where the user is physically located. And again, that's something else I'll show you in the demo coming up. Now, I mentioned changing how the user connects to the desktop. That's the next step in this process. First, you authorize the remote users. Then you indicate what they have permission to access. Finally, the student chooses a machine to connect to based on their needs. The technology that connects the remote user to their hosted desktop is a display protocol, and Leostream supports a wide range of them. Regardless of what type of task your student needs to accomplish, from working in Excel up to those CAD applications, you can use Leostream to connect them using a display protocol that's really up to the task at hand. Maybe that's something simple like RDP or VNC. For clientless access using iPads or Chromebooks, maybe that's HTML5 viewer that Leostream provides. But for more graphics intense tasks, maybe you want to investigate HP Remote Boost, MechTime TGX, tiered PC over IP to name a few. The key here is that you have options. So you can pick and even mix the right protocol for any given tasks that your student has to do. So that all sounds great for a totally remote student base, right? They all go through Leostream, it's all good. But some of you may have some number of students returning to campus as well. How do you avoid conflicts between students logging in directly at a desk and students logging in remotely? Well, it's actually easier than you think with Leostream. You see, Leostream tracks logins for any machine where you install the Leostream agent. And using that knowledge, you can configure Leostream to avoid conflicts so that remote users and on-prem users can coexist within the same set of machines. And not only does that tracking allow you to avoid conflicts, what gives Leostream what we call audit level tracking. And really, this is augmenting the monitoring that Liquidware provides. Leostream specifically, we're tracking logins, disconnect, reconnects, idle time that occurs for the user's desktop session after they log into the resource. And that's not just for tracking though. What you'll see in the demo is that these events and logs allow you to automate actions based on those events. For example, logging out an idle student so that after they've fallen asleep, you can make their resource available for the next person. So let's dive into what the Leostream platform actually is. At a high level, it consists of 4 components here. Starting at the top right is the connection broker. It essentially is the brains of the operation. It's where you'll define your pools and the rules to assign desktops in those pools out to users. On your hosted desktops is the Leostream agent. It's a small but mighty component and is essential for you to get the most out of your Leostream environment. It's that component I said is tracking those user logins and other events and sending that information back to the broker. Those 2 components, the connection broker and the Leostream agent, typically are deployed on your campus or in your data center, wherever you happen to host your desktops. Now, technically, the connection broker can be installed anywhere, but people tend to co-locate it with their desktops. In my high-level diagram here, you see little blue users at the bottom right. They're connecting directly to the desktops. Those are your students who are walking up to a machine. And I'll kind of show you that a little in the demo as well. But keep in mind, you could build an environment where those on-campus students have to log into Leostream as well. And in that case, that blue line from the users would go up to the connection broker instead of directly to the desktops. Now, switching our focus to the remote users, they're the yellow people on the left. They sit down at any of a number of supported Leostream clients, including web browsers, thin clients, zero clients, and our Leostream Connect software client. Basically, there's a Leostream client pretty much for any device type your student may have. Now, I mentioned logging in from a web browser and using the Leostream HTML5 viewer for Chromebooks and iPads. But a web browser works perfectly well for students with any kind of Mac, Windows, or even Linux laptop or desktop. For students who don't want to use a web browser, we do have our Leostream Connect client. It again installs on Mac, Windows, and Linux. So again, whatever your students have, it's full BYOD kind of environment. Now, the key for remote access, however, is that 4th and final component of the Leostream platform, the Leostream Gateway. It plays a role in every step of the user's Leostream session. First, the gateway is a conduit for remote users to log into your Leostream connection broker that's sitting on campus. That's step 1 you see near the top right there. After the connection broker works its magic to authenticate the user and offer them the correct resources, the Leostream Gateway then switches gears and acts as a tunnel for the user's connection to the desktop. That means no VPN is needed, no complicated NAT gateways to configure. Our Leostream Gateway handles that all. So let's just look quickly at some of these components in more detail. First is the connection broker. It installs using a real simple command on CentOS or rel, which, as I mentioned, it can be a virtual machine, physical machine, on campus, wherever you want to put it. Now, if you're not an advanced Linux user, it's not used a lot in your organization, that's fine, never fear. All of the broker configuration is done using a web browser that you'll see in the demo. You don't need to manage the Linux machine that much at all. And the advantage of using Linux is that you don't need to invest in a Windows Server license to host your Leostream connection broker. In the connection broker administrator web interface, not only will you define the pools and access control rules we've been talking about, but you have a single place where you can view and manage all the users and computing resources in your environment. And that's no matter where those computing resources are hosted or what operating system they run. You can have physical and virtual machines on campus, a lab of iMacs, extra compute hosted up in the cloud, and you can manage them all through Leostream. Just as a simple example, that means you can reboot any machines across all these platforms without needing to log into the specific management console from that platform. Just reboot the machine within Leostream. And then administrator web interface also allows for role-based access. So you can create different roles with different permissions. For example, the main Leostream administrator is allowed to define your pools for the different classes, and then classroom administrators maybe are allowed only to view and reboot the machines in their specific classroom pool. Or as another example, you could define classroom instructors that are allowed to see their pool of machines and actually log out students who might be taking up a resource that's needed for another class. Now, we've talked about how Leostream authenticates users and offers them the correct resources, but another advantage of using Leostream as the gatekeeper to your environment is that it can optimize resource usage and automate capacity as your remote student body grows or just fluctuates. The former comes back to how Leostream monitors student usage and controls the length of time the user has access to a particular resource. The latter hints at Leostream's provisioning capabilities. For virtual and cloud environments, we have the ability to automatically spin up new machines and tear them back down. And this gives you that hybrid on-prem, off-prem environment. Now, I realize right now, a lot of you probably do have just physical machines in labs and classrooms that you're trying to figure out how do you provide access to. But having this ability to burst into the cloud and then use Leostream to provide that access and manage the capacity, and Liquidware to automate the types of applications that are needed based on who's logging in, that's a pretty powerful tool for the future. So that's the connection broker. And primarily, this is the component that you're going to see during the demo. Let's very quickly talk about the Leostream gateway. The gateway is the second major component of your Leostream environment. Just like the broker, it installs on CentOS or RHEL, but those two components do need to be on separate machines. And that's a purposeful architecture design. While the connection broker can be tucked away on your internal network, the Leostream gateway is the publicly facing address for your environment. It provides an access point for your remote users and sends the login traffic to the connection broker. The connection broker then decides which Leostream gateway handles the user's selected desktop connection. And because these components are decoupled, the desktop connection doesn't have to use the same gateway that was used for the login. Long story short, that makes it really easy for you to design environments with desktops in different networks or across on and off premises environments. Plus, it allows you to indicate that on-campus students don't go through the gateway for their desktop connection at all. For students that will go through the gateway, that desktop connection can be done in a number of ways. Again, Leostream Gateway does include a built-in HTML5 viewer that supports RDP, VNC, and SSH. So you can provide in-browser access really to just about anything. If you've got CS students who just love the VI editor, just SSH them into a Linux machine. The Leostream Gateway also supports a number of client-based protocols. And by that, I mean the desktop connection is established by launching a software client on the user's device. Think RDP when you launch MSTSC app. Here, the Leostream Gateway supports RDP, TGX, HP Remote Boost, PC over IP, and we actually have two new protocols in beta for our gateway, which are No Machine and Nice DCV. So between all these protocols, you can really, again, support a wide range of applications that require different amounts of performance from the protocol. Now, I previously mentioned that introducing the Leostream Gateway into your design eliminates the need for a VPN for desktop connections. And that's beneficial for a couple reasons. First, if you don't already have a VPN to support remote users, you would need to actually acquire one, configure it, get VPN clients out to your students, and that really adds some complication to your setup. And you can avoid that with the Leostream Gateway. But second, the VPN can be a bottleneck on desktop connection performance. If you have a large number of students connecting through a VPN, their connection performance will suffer after a while. With the Leostream Gateway, especially for these client-based protocols, the gateway manages its own firewall to port forward the display protocol traffic from the appropriate client IP to the permitted desktop IP. And the port forwarding is very, very lightweight, so the gateway doesn't become a bottleneck on your environment. Now, obviously, you're going to have networking considerations to keep in mind, but the gateway itself will not introduce the problems that the VPN would. The final component I want to touch on is the Leostream agent. As I mentioned, it's small but mighty. No matter what operating system you use, there's a Leostream agent for you. For Microsoft Windows, the agent runs as a Windows service. For Linux and Mac, we provide a Java version of the Leostream agent. Now, the agent is responsible for notifying the connection broker about user events. Again, things like logging in, disconnect, reconnect, log out, goes idle. And then you can automate actions based on those events. And as I mentioned, our agent monitors those events not just for users logging in through Leostream, but for anyone who logs into a desktop. We call anyone who logs into a machine without first logging into Leostream as a rogue user. Even if you tell all your students on campus to log in using Leostream, someone is going to sit down at a desktop, log in, and get to work. Well, to Leostream, that user is rogue, but only until the Leostream agent reports their login to the connection broker. And at that point, you can tell the broker to take over that session, so you can still automate actions based on subsequent Leostream agent events. Now, again, to Thomas's privacy point, if the Leostream agent sounds a little too all-knowing, rest at ease, it's okay. The communication between the agents and the broker is secured so that your agents will only ever send the notifications to your connection broker, and the agent will only ever take instructions from your connection broker. So you don't have to worry about data leaking out or people trying to make your agents do things on your desktops. A couple last points on the agent. In addition to tracking the user sessions, it does have two other purposes. The first relates to provisioning. If you are going to look at bursting out in the cloud, or if you have virtualization environments, if you're provisioning from master images, the Leostream agent can reset host names and join domains for these machines. And then it does include a desktop experience component that allows you to manage USB device pass-through, so that perhaps users, when they're on campus, they are allowed to pass through USB devices to the machine, but once they go off campus, you want to lock that down. You can do that. And then it also has some functionality to reset registry keys on the remote machine, which has some potential interesting ways that we can integrate with the tools that Liquidware provides. All right, where am I? Okay, I believe this is my last slide, and then I'm going to say demo time. And really, I just wanted to pass a couple last thoughts here to get you thinking past the panic, which is kind of the current situation we all find ourselves in. Yes, Leostream and Liquidware can help you solve the needs you have today, definitely. But some of the key advantages of using us to do so is that you are optimizing and future-proofing your environment for tomorrow. As Thomas mentioned, Leostream and Liquidware share this vendor-neutral philosophy. So that means use what you have now, burst into any cloud, monitor and automate usage so you can maximize resource usage, and particularly in the cloud, minimize cost. Carefully implemented, remote learning really can work. The online universities have kind of proved that for years. And so by embracing it and using kind of best of breed tools to build your solution, you're going to see it's going to set you up well for the future. Okay, I have just a few minutes, but I am going to blaze through a little bit of a demo, and then I think what we'll do after is I'll just record the full demo and we can send you out the recording. But essentially, here is the Leostream connection broker. If I sign in as the main admin, this is where I would come in and actually hook the broker up to my different authentication servers, indicate if I have any MFA providers that I need to work with, and then hook the broker up with the external systems that host my machines. If I have physical machines, I install the Leostream agent and they show up in the Enrolled Desktops Center, but we can also talk to any of the major clouds, virtualization layers that you might have as well. If you're using gateways, I simply come in here and add my gateways to the broker. And you can have as many gateways as you need to satisfy the size of your user population and the location of your desktops. The configuration section then, here's where you're going to build these different pools. And the point in Leostream, very flexible. So you can do things like, I have a pool here, which is all of the machines that are in my cloud lab. And I've done that based on a naming convention. But I also have a pool here, which is, for the French 3 class, things like that. After I have pools, you define plans which tell the broker how to manage the connections to those desktops, as well as the desktop session over the course of time. Protocol plans indicate which protocols we're going to use to do the connection, and you see a number of the different options here. Power control plans allow you to automate power states. So maybe you want to power down your cloud machines when the user logs out. And then release plans indicate how long a user actually owns a machine based on the Leostream agent events that are coming in. And so using these plans, you can actually really optimize, making sure users aren't taking up machines when they don't need them anymore, only giving them access during the time that the class is going on, things like that. And then everything comes together in policies where you can build policies that indicate which pools people have access to. Here I'm saying I want to give one desktop from the math pool, but only to students that are actually in the math class, and so forth. Down here is one machine from the French pool, but only to people in the French class. I mentioned locations. Here's where you can find different client locations, my different roles, so I can give the role-based access to users. And then finally, in the assignments table is where I assign out these roles and policies to users based, again, on who they are and where they log in from. And then also because it's where they are and who they log in from, that determines if they need to go through multi-factor authentication. Just very quickly from a user perspective, this is the web client for Leostream. It is brandable. You take off our logos, add your own. And if I connect in here, then I'll see the HTML5 connection log in the browser. And as that's going on here in the broker, you can see the system log page actually tracking everything that's going on in your system. So I see the login, I see what the students offered, I see the Leostream agent notices, and now over on the desktops page, I will see Laura assigned out to that machine right there. I also happen to have here, Bill is considered to be a professor, so what he only sees when he logs in is the administrator interface, but you see his role just locks him down to the desktops page with the particular pool access there. I swear I'm going to click this off very soon, but here's the Leostream client, just showing you quickly. If I log in there, it's of course going to open up on the other screen. But that actually is launching a connection to a machine that's up in the Google Cloud. And now if you see what's happening in the background, I requested a connection to the desktop. It's connecting me. And because we have my broker set up to make sure there's available desktops for the next user, it triggered off provisioning. And you can see that over here in my Google Cloud account. There's the machine I'm connecting to in the background, and here's the machine that's being created while that's going on. So like I said, I am going to stop there because I don't want to, your time is valuable.
It was a great demo.
Thanks. I will do a full one and record it and we'll send it out.
Good.
Thanks.
So a couple questions came in. I think you covered these, but just to be clear about support for Mac devices, I think you mentioned iOS, but laptops too, MacBook?
Yes. So as a client or remote, we can do any Mac OS or iOS device, iOS on the client, obviously, but Mac OS on client or remote side.
Okay. And then scheduling access. I believe you talked about this, the different delegated authority, but also can you schedule access to different machines?
There's interesting ways you can do that. Now a little bit of it requires some scripting, but it is a unique use case that we're seeing pop up in a lot of educational institutions. And so we have a feature that's under development currently so that we can add nice UI to that. You can define groups of users and assign them out to your pools, so that the math students only have access to the math machines from 10 to 11 or something.
Okay, great. And then one final question. What about the types of applications that are ideal for this? Can you support applications like CAD, CAD/CAM, like things that may be graphics intensive and others, and the performance, is that suitable for this?
Yeah, the key with the type of application is to select you run it on the appropriate machine so that it has the CPU and GPU that it might require, and then also make sure you're using a display protocol that supports can potentially leverage the GPU if it needs to do that. So definitely it will work. You just have to make sure that you have the components in place that support those apps.
Okay, great. Thank you, Karen. And just to wrap up, to let you know where you can go for more information, the URLs are there for Leostream and for Liquidware. You can reach out directly to us on sales. Even the people here on the phone will get these emails if you send them to these aliases, and we'll respond back to you with any questions that you may have had or any that I wasn't not able to get to. We'd like to wish you well and wish many of you good luck, given that many of you are administrators of schools and these challenges are real going back to school for Back to School 2.0. Please reach out and let us know if we can help in any way. Thank you for attending today's webinar, and there'll be a recording also posted of this later so you can share with colleagues. And with that, that concludes today's webinar. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.